talk will be there at least.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's somewhat informative at least. We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. We'll
a bit
judge
rusty.
You
Well, it is very
7
nearly
o'clock.
7 o'clock. So shall we get this show on the road?
Aye. For the first time ever, we're starting on time.
I know, it's almost unheard of. That's because everyone politely turned up in plenty of time.
What did you say? Is it up to me now?
No,
It's
I'm
all to
going to
you.
actually do the right thing, Simon, and introduce you. So this is it. We're going to do it all very properly. Good evening, everybody. Now we're into the proper part of the user group session, and it's my a tremendous pleasure for a whole bunch of reasons, personal and professional, to welcome Simon Ågren from Sweden to come and present for us tonight. I guess Simon and I have known each other for getting on for a year, 9 months, something like that, partly through the maturity model stuff that Simon Doy and I do. As we said, we're definitely the Simon Club tonight. And then Simon Ågren reached out to us to ask us some more questions about how to implement the maturity model, and the conversation really carried on from there. So when we realized that we were able to get world-class people to come along to these user group sessions and talk for us, I twisted his arm, and here he is. Simon, that's as much introduction as you're going to get. I'm going to now hand over to you.
Sure. Do you want me to introduce myself more, or should I just get going with the presentation?
You should probably tell us something about you.
Yeah. Tell us why you're here.
Make stuff up.
Other than the fact you got arm twisted by a Simon.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. He said, okay, I don't know if we have time for you, Simon, but maybe we could squeeze you in. And I was like, please, 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 I need to get some more speaking engagement going. I'm so rusty and everything. No, but it's really good, and it's nice to be here. I think it's my first time presenting for a user group. Since the pandemic, since everything got online, I was like, nah, this is boring. But it's not really. I just But yeah, I'm from Sweden. They call me King in the North, or King of the North. It's not that I'm good at something. It's just that I live very far up north. We got always snow. I help my customers with shoveling snow from the roofs and things like that. And so I kind of, okay, if they're gonna joke on my behalf, I could as well own it. So I made it as a more of a parody thing. So I'm also named that in Twitter and everything. So I need to carry my cross, so to speak. And what can I say more? I come from a developer background. I used to be in sales for like 10 years, and then I decided that I want to work in IT. And I studied for 3 years. I don't know what it's called in English, like it's informatics, like system science or something like that. Yeah, very high level, not that technical at all. And then I started as a trainee, got into SharePoint development, quickly got into more cloud things, I would say. So my IT journey hasn't been that long, but I've always been very curious and had the fortune to work with a lot of different stuff, many projects and many customers. So I've experienced a lot of things quite quickly and evolved from that. Nowadays, I would say I work more as a solution architect. Right now, I'm at the customer in the line organization, which is super weird because I'm at the customer side. I don't hate, I don't hate group IT because I am group IT nowadays, which is super weird. And I just helped out with a divestiture. So we're taking a Swedish company, Sandvik, to a entire new company, a new IT environment and everything. So I'm like the solution architect for Microsoft 365 there. But I would say nowadays I work a bit more holistically with Microsoft 365. I tend to configure things as well, and but I'm really interested in governance and learning some more about the compliance stuff, and that's where I am. Might not be the best at everything, but I really try to improve, and I love sharing what what I learned as well. So I don't know. What else do you want to know? Just ask me.
So have you got any particular parts of the 365 stack that you really like? And I guess, what are the things that you wish Microsoft had never done?
It seems my stuff is not working really here. You said something I wish I'd never done. That's the only thing I heard.
Which parts of the Microsoft stack do you really like? And what things do you wish Microsoft had never done?
Oh, that's a good question. You really put me on the spot here. I mean, I'm not that picky. I kind of like everything they do because I just love learning. I even love when they change the names of everything because then I need to update myself as well. But from the top of my head, I don't really know if there's anything that really, I don't see any pain points really as of right now. Maybe I can come up with something else in some time, but someone could inspire me, throw something in there, and then I could, yeah, I hate that.
Okay, here's an interesting change for you. We, in the SharePoint side, took ownership of the Power Platform when it came along because said, yay, this is this wonderful technology that we've got that's part of it. We even went as far as renaming our user group to the Power Platform user group. And what's happened is over the last 3 years, those dastardly Dynamics people have pretty much taken the Power Platform away from us, haven't they? And it's like, no, this is our toy now.
Yeah.
And so you have this weird duality where the Power Platform underpins all Dynamics solutions, and it's also our sort of way of sticking things together in a more casual way. So it's kind of interesting the way, who does the Power Platform belong to, and do people see it as belonging to the Microsoft 365 side, in other words, basically ex-SharePoint people, or does it belong to the Dynamics people?
I've seen that as well, because I don't work too much with the Power Platform. Right now we have another architect in, I usually only work with like the basics of some environment strategy, setting up some DLP and things like that. Dynamics is really not my strong side, but I've also seen that it feels like, no, but we are the real Power Platform. You could play around with your toys there a little bit. We can give you some space here. So I don't really know there. I think it's hard. And when it comes to like governance around that, how much, Dylan, how much do you think, let's say you put in a center of excellence or something like that, the COAE, the technical thing in the Power Platform, who do you see sits there and manages the governance? Is it people from Dynamics, or is it, the SharePoint side of things doing that? Do you have any opinion?
I think it would depend on the organization as to what drove the move to that. But there is a very fundamental different part of the organization that owns a Dynamics solution versus owns a SharePoint solution.
Yeah.
It comes from two different strands of the organization, because Dynamics is driven by operations, and obviously SharePoint comes from a more sort of documentation governance heavy side, as opposed to the world of effectively Dynamic solutions are governed by sales, operations, that side, the doing things far less. So yeah, it's an interesting one as to who actually owns a Power Platform solution, and who governs it and who controls and shapes it.
And that probably is an excellent segue into talking about governance for Teams.
Sure, no Power Platform here, but yeah, definitely. I can go ahead and share. Do you have any opinions if I should do PowerPoint Live or sharing a screen?
Whatever seems to work.
Yeah, we'll try. Trying to start PowerPoint Live here and see if we could get something going. So the official question here, do you see my screen?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
That's good. I don't think I'm gonna put myself in front of you, because it will interfere with my slides. They aren't friendly for that sort of thing. And excuse me if my voice cracks sometimes, because as I said, I've had a cold, still have some as well. So but let's get this going. I just need to tell you first, the guy on this picture here is my colleague, is my closest colleague, Ola. And we have a saying, because he tends to be in all presentations because he's in stock images. And at some of our customers as well, he's at stock images. So we always say a presentation without Ola is not a presentation. I guess it's more funny if we do something internal, but I had to have him with us now. So yeah.
So you know the stock image guy.
He's the stock image guy, yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like this. He almost looks like this, but it's like whenever he could have a bad hair day, his face could be, but whenever someone takes a photo of him, it's like, I don't know if you've seen How I Met Your Mother, but it's like okay, anyways, maybe I should get going now. So welcome to today's session. We're going to talk about Teams governance, and I'm going to talk about a lot here. I'm going to cover a lot of ground, and I tend to sometimes bring in too much into my presentation. So if anything is unclear, feel free to contact me. I love a good discussion and everything. And you could also interrupt me if you have any questions. I'm not going to be able to see the chat, so some of the other Simons might be able to moderate that. Other than that, I think we should get going. Some of you learned a little bit who I am. I'm Simon. I'm from Sweden, where we always do Swedish fika. Not really. And I'm chief technical architect for a specialist unit in Advania we called Knowledge Factory. And we're about 50 people now. I'm building a team of modern work people. We are 3 MVPs right now, and we want to be a bit more, of course. And with the acquirement of content and cloud as well for Advania, the bigger company, so say, we are about 12 MVPs now, I think. So it's super nice. We have a lot of general knowledge, cover a lot of ground in many countries, and we have a good set of community people as well. So that's good. Yeah, and I live up there where you can see the castle. It's my King of the North castle. And people in southern Sweden, they would probably say that this is the north. And people living in Stockholm, they would say that this is the north, but this is the true north, somewhere around here. And I don't know if you know Game of Thrones, but this is probably where you would put the wall, and north of that, it would be the wildlings and everything. So yeah.
That looks an awful lot like a map of England.
Yeah,
and then Scotland on the top.
An old castle and everything. Yeah, and as I said, I'm coming from the dev side of things. Nowadays, I work more as a solution architect, you could say. I love, understanding the technical stuff as well, but I'm more of a helping to advise and helping with the strategic planning of Microsoft 365 then. Very interested in governance and compliance and trying to be good at it. And we'll see if I could provide some value here as well. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about why we're here today. And I want to go over briefly what governance strategy might be. And we're going to go down a step and talk about how we can operationalize governance in Teams and Microsoft 365. And I'm going to take some help of my fictional company, Royals of the North, IT, and talk about how we could do a bit more practically. And we just summarize at the end, and we take some questions afterwards and some resources. So I really want you to understand what governance is from a broad perspective, and it's my view at looking at things. And I really want to show you the options we have in Microsoft 365 as well. And I want to take a base in what is out-of-the-box features, but also a little bit how to think about it, and when we might need to customize something or take in a third-party tool as well. So we're going to touch upon that at least. And I want to give these options that we have some context to give you some ideas that maybe you could implement, something you could improve, or maybe you're not even agreeing with me, so we could take a discussion and you could challenge me on it. That's fine. Okay, so from my perspective, I would say that simply put, governance strategy is about defining people, processes, rules, and structure. And we also need to define everyone's roles and responsibilities. I would say that governance, adoption, and change management is essential. And also the governance choices we make might impact our bigger adoption plan as well. Because let's say that we decide that an owner is responsible of guest management in the team, or responsible for renewal if we're using expiration policies. That is something we need to communicate. That is something we might need to educate the owner. And as we go along and changes happen in this evergreen environment, we also need to, when things change and we decide on things, we also need to educate and make sure that everyone knows their responsibility here. We need to sit down and collect requirements from, let's say, legal, compliance, HR, different parts of IT. We need to understand the internal procedures, the rules we have, and we need really to think about this and align to what is practically applicable and does not hinder the end users from being productive. As we always say, if we hinder the end users and lock everything down, they're gonna find some other ways to collaborate. And the best option we have to provide governance is to keep them inside of the platform. So first and foremost, we need to define the scope. And as an example, you might want to have a different governance board for Azure AD. And I'm talking about the entire suite now, the big product with all the things in it. And we should probably have a goal and a vision. We need to be able to measure what we're doing right, but also it helps us explain why we're doing things and what's in it for the end users as well. We need a group of people that could make decisions to some extent. We also need them to help us implement the strategy and adjust it whenever it's needed. They need to consider external factors. Is it a new COVID coming in, new laws, regulations, and the business requirements as well? And we need to define roles and responsibilities for different use cases. It could be technical roles, such as who is global admin, but it could also be who is responsible of keeping track of the message center or the M365 roadmap, and who is using public preview in Teams as well to make sure that we try out the new things as well beforehand. Yeah, and we also need to we need to define the settings for the scope, the workloads that we have in scope as well. Okay, so out of the box, Microsoft has enabled almost everything. So it's practically the Wild West. And I've seen some terrifying examples of maybe 1,000 teams created in 2 or 3 months time. And almost every team had a different structure, only using the general channel. See a lot of test and demo teams, teams not being used anymore with only one owner, no members, no owners, one member, etc., etc. So it gets messy. And why do we care if it gets messy then? From my perspective, it's tough for the users to know which team is the correct one if we've got 25 HR teams, So, and with different structures in each team, it's hard to find things. And you're bound to more context switching if you're only using the general channel, because the whole idea of Teams is pulling things in where we work, pulling in tabs, pulling in content that we're going to use, or else you're just going to context switch, and you might not even like Teams because you don't know the purpose of it. And it could also be some more strain on IT because they might need to rename teams, merge teams, and it's not a trivial thing to merge teams if we're not talking only about content then. Okay, so governance can help us then to prevent unnecessary miscommunication. We can understand both the responsibilities and expectations from each other by bringing both business and IT together. And we make sure that we are compliant. And good governance might also increase the end user experience and drive adoption at the same time. So we're delivering functions with a balanced approach to them. We're not suffocating the end users. And by implementing compliance features with the end user at the center, we're thinking about the end user. We don't affect productivity, and we make sure to educate the end users at the same time so they understand what they should be and shouldn't be doing. So by doing that, we limit the risk of oversharing by having the combination of technical controls and an educated end user. We can also limit duplications and make sure the teams has a start and an end. And for teams that is not being used anymore, make sure that we have a good mechanism to get rid of these. Okay, you've probably seen this image. I just want you to know that whenever you create a team, you also get a Microsoft 365 group in the backend. And that group lives in Azure AD, and it's the membership service for all of the associated services here. So by creating a group, you get, as you see here, you get a SharePoint site, the OneNote, the Planner, Power BI Workspace, email, calendar, and stream. And if you create from Teams, you would get a team as well. Of course, if you would create from Yammer, you would also get a Yammer community. But the point here is that Microsoft 365 Groups is really the center of collaboration here. So a lot of Teams governance has to do with actually managing the groups. So many of the backend settings affect the end user experience in Microsoft Teams, but I think that some of these settings are more team specific around governance. And we have a lot in Azure AD, but we mostly care about the group settings such as expiration policies, naming policies, who can create groups. But we also have guest access into tenant, conditional access, identity governance, identity protection. And we got the Teams admin center as well. Here we implement the global settings, but we also got something called policies. And they could be global, and we could also scope them to a group or a specific user if we want to. Microsoft Purview, formerly known as Microsoft Compliance or the Compliance Centers. But really these settings is about protecting the organization's data and ensuring compliance. So we got information protection, sensitivity labels. We got data lifecycle management, retention. It used to be called identity governance, but it's the same thing. And we got DLP or data loss preventions. And some other things or some other places to take into consideration is, the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 Admin Center, SharePoint, OneDrive, Stream, Planner, Yammer. So today we're going to go over templates, collaboration templates to begin with. We're going to look a little bit about naming and how to apply it. We're going to look at, compliance, but just a little bit, because classifying data and defining retention needs to be done separately, probably in a different project. And this is nothing that IT could decide on. It really needs input from the business. So whenever IT decides on these things, you're doing it wrong. Doesn't matter what you say. And today we're going to have a look at sensitivity labels and mostly on how to package settings according to how you want to classify teams. Are you going to allow guests in the tenant? How are we going to share inside and outside the organization? And how are we controlling this? We're also looking at expiration policies and how we could find inactive groups and teams. And provisioning or creation, we really want to look at how we're going to create teams and who will get to create teams as well. If we got time and I don't talk too much, we could have a look at some parts in the Teams admin center as well, such as which apps should we allow and some of the settings and policies as well. I briefly want to mention as well, a part of the success, as mentioned earlier, is really monitoring and monitoring and what's the word? Doesn't matter. Okay. And we also need to care about education and, communicating changes and handling changes as well. And there's good sessions around that as well on how to automate that. Okay. So briefly around licenses then. Some of these features might need Azure AD Premium 1, and you get that from having E3 licenses or Microsoft 365 Business Premium. If you're happy enough to have E5 licenses and Azure AD Premium too, you lucky bastard, you call me and we could do a lot of cool things. When it comes to compliance features, I would say in general, if you're doing something manually, it could be done manually. You only need the E3 license for it. But if you need some automation or some defaulted things, then you would need the E5 license. And generally speaking, it's all users benefiting from the service that requires that license. Okay. Royals of the North with the Swedish colors here. They want a balanced approach between IT controls and user adoption. And they really try to think about these things as they make their decisions. Collaboration templates. It's not a technical term. It's more about sitting down and together with the business establishing what type of everyday needs exist for collaboration in teams. And from my perspective, it's often overlooked how much team structure and naming could impact long-term productivity. I'm going to show you some blog posts afterwards if you want to read some more about that, because I could have an entire session only on naming and structure. But templates is a really good way to manage this structure and make things, more straightforward for the end user, and that way driving adoption because they see the point of using this. And I often see that it's not being used, and I think it has to do a lot with, we have had a pandemic. We might have needed to roll out teams very quickly. And also thinking the misconception that rolling out things as standard is a good idea. Microsoft 365 it's created to solve a lot of different business problems, but you need to tailor it. And also thinking that templates is customization and that it puts strains on IT. But if we take a step backwards and think about it, by not templatizing and finding these common themes, instead, each team is a custom solution because it's different. You just create it, you do different things with it. It might have different structure. So it's harder to maintain them if you don't templatize them. I don't know if templatize is a word, but you're the British people. So creating only default teams makes no sense. Most companies use more than one type of collaboration. And why isn't this working? Okay, so templates might be organizational structures. They could also be process-based. They could be cross-organizational. And if we're going to be a bit more technical here, out of the box, we have Microsoft Teams templates, and they provide us with pre-built team templates that were created for specific industries such as healthcare or education. You could also create your own custom ones. You could base it on a base template and copy it, change some settings, call it something else. You're not going to be able to change everything in a base template, but some of the features. Or you could create it entirely from scratch, or you could use a already finished team and say, I'm going to create a template based on this as well. Just know that the UI is very limited. You could set up channels and tabs and apps, but you would really need to use the Teams PowerShell module to configure everything. As an example, sometimes I see that in Teams you would only want to have the owner being able to create the channels and handle the channels, manage the channels. You only want the users to be able to be productive in the channels. And that is something you could set in the settings of the template, so you don't have to go manually after creation and untick that box. So, and automated governance is always better. Start small, don't do too many templates, pilot them, get some feedback, refine them, and iterate until everyone is satisfied. But Royals, let's make this easy because I'm just using examples here. They want to have departments, they want to have products. This is a smaller scope than a department, and it's a project, but it's a long-lasting project, I would say. And we also have the short-lived projects that are more, on the fly created. So after we have our templates, we need to think about naming. And I would say the options we have this prefix suffix naming policy. It allows you to add a static string or some user profile properties into the Microsoft 365 group name. And the limitation is that you could only
I've lost the audio on you, Simon. Is it just me or is it everybody?
I've lost it as well.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Can
Oh
you
yeah,
hear
that's better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Did you hear something about the group naming policy?
We got as far as group naming policy, and then you're about to explain some stuff about it.
Okay, yeah. But the thing is here, you could use a static string or you could use a Azure AD profile property in the name, but it's very limited because you can only have one policy here. So if you want to tie naming into whatever template you choose, because you want a prefix showing what type of template, you're not going to be able to use that then. That was my point. And custom block words is also very good. You could block words as, you know, department names. You should never have a public and private, I mean, the privacy of the team in the name. That's a very bad practice because that could change. So you should block that as well. Test and demo, I would say only IT should be able to create these, because as an admin, you could, you know, overrun these policies. And maybe some company acronyms as well. And if you want to make some reservations for the intranet or something. And both of these are a part of the Azure AD P1. The other thing you could do is use a custom provisioning solution or third-party tool, and any new or modern one should be able to tie. You should be able to tie the naming into that specific template. So if you're creating a project named Spring Cleaning, then you should probably get a PRJ-Spring Cleaning as an example. You could also leave it to the end users, but even with trained end users, they forget to put in the correct name. And that is why some organizations enable post-provisioning governance, maybe sending an email with a checklist to see, have you done this? Have you done this? But it's really up to having a culture where people are willing to remediate or recreate when needed then. Simon, could you mute yourself, please? I'm getting some background noise here. I'm so fancy. Okay, but to mitigate duplication then, I mean, encourage people to use public teams whenever they can. There is reasons to use private teams, such as hiding it from search or hiding content from the search in a department team or a management team or so. And you should create a Teams directory where you let users create, because, you know, showing all of the teams, even the one that you don't have access to, is a way to make sure that you see and don't create any duplicates, really. Make sure to use the custom block words. And when it comes to understanding context, I would say think about prefixes as a way to identify different teams. They are very helpful to understanding what type of content and what type of context this team is for. But make sure to only use a few acronyms and only use country or region when it's really necessary. Yeah, I said. And you know, when it comes to naming, don't have it too long, because then it gets truncated and you need to hover over it. So make sure to have only a few prefixes and make sure to have 29 characters in total, or else it's going to be truncated. So once again, make sure that to only use necessary and helpful prefixes if you're going to use them. Yeah, and this is very basic. I would say Royals, they decide to use custom block words. They don't like the group naming policy because they can only have one. They want to connect the naming to the specific templates. So do you allow guests in your tenant? I hope your answer is yes, because it severely reduces the chance of shadow IT, and it allows for efficient collaboration between people outside the organization. You know, only sending emails, it's not very fun or efficient, and it's bound to leave you with different versions of a file because you're sending it as attachment instead of sharing, etc. So, and guest sharing is turned on by default in Microsoft 365 for the groups and in SharePoint. However, the mother for this is Azure AD B2B external collaboration settings. That's a mouthful. So if you limit it here in Azure AD, or if you block it, then you don't have to care about any of the other options, really. But in Microsoft 365 Admin Center, this is on by default, but here you could set the settings for Microsoft 365 Groups for allowing guests. And we also got in the Teams Admin Center as a master switch to allow guests in the tenant. I would say the challenges with guests is increased responsibility for Teams owners because they need to understand how to handle guests, but maybe also, you know, how to keep track of if guests should be in this team as well. We have an increased risk of data loss just because we're collaborating with people outside our organization, so we might send files to them that they shouldn't have. And some other things here, you know, access to active teams. The whole access thing is really hard as well, even if it's internal or if it's for guests. And a lot of people think that when you delete a team or when you remove a user from a team, that guest is removed from the tenant, but it's still there in Azure AD. So it could at least, you know, chat and message people in the tenant. I would say still enable guest access at the organizational level and instead limit specifically using sensitivity labels. And make sure to use sensitivity labels at the content level as well. So we have encryption and protection wherever it's needed. Use data loss prevention for you know, preventing accidental oversharing and also educating the end users. So we could give them a policy tip. You shouldn't do that or something. And when it comes to teams, specifically, you would need, or maybe not Azure AD P2, you need E5 license at least. But when it comes to the SharePoint files and Exchange, you could just go with whatever you got. Yeah, okay, and apply social control and educate team owners, just so that they know how to handle all these things as well. And one last thing, if you have Azure AD P2, look at entitlement management and access reviews, because it really helps with the two last problems there with the life cycles of guests in the tenant as well. So it's super, super good. Okay, so for the departments, we're not going to have any guests because it doesn't make sense. For the product teams, we're going to allow it. But for the secret stuff in the product teams, we're going to use private channels. And for the projects, we're going to allow guests. Okay, traditionally sensitivity labels they have only been used to classify and protect documents and emails. And we could also use them for containers. Containers meaning Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365 Groups, and SharePoint sites. And your strategy should contain, as mentioned earlier, all the settings and all the requirements. And these labels are a way to enforce and automate some of these requirements. And if you see on my taxonomy to the right here, I've added three labels, or site and unified group on 3 labels. So they're going to be used for the container level here. And try to keep them in the parent labels and not using sub labels. You could also create different labels if you don't want to use your taxonomy that you already got, or if you don't have one, if you don't want one. But if you create a new sensitivity label, you could set the privacy. You're setting if it's going to be public or private. If you set it to be none, then the user gets to decide on their own while creating it. And we could also, as I said, make sure to allow guests at the tenant level and instead limit it here if you want to. Then you could just uncheck that box. You could also control external sharing. My default is new and existing guests. The example here was anyone. I don't think you should use that, but it gives you the option to limit it even further if you want only existing guests or only people in your organization here. And if you're using conditional access policies, you could, for instance, limit unmanaged devices, you know, not in tune, enrolled, or hybrid joined devices, then to say that you should only use the web, or you could block access entirely. Not going to talk about authentication context here, but in preview, we got the site sharing settings here as well. Microsoft, they recommend that you change the way you're allowed to share the sites in the backend sites of your teams, because the members can share the site as default, but they recommend that you set that only the site owners could share the site, but the members could share the content, because it aligns better with how Microsoft 365 groups are built as well, and the responsibilities there. So here we could say that members could share files and folders, but only owners could share the site here. Member share all is the default version, and member shares none, that is for, they can't do anything. Only owners can do it. We could also set the default sharing link if we want to, but we could only do this with PowerShell as of right now. Yeah, we could also set the default link permission if we want to have edit or view. Okay, so the general one that we created, I set it to none, so we could decide on our own if we want a private or a public team here. And this is how it looks when it's been created. We can hover over the label there and get some information, the description, to help us to understand what we can do here. And we stuck with the default for external sharing. We allow guests here as well. We took Microsoft's advice and only allow site owners to share the site. We run with the default from managed devices. Your default might be different. And the default sharing link is your organization. And it's mostly because these teams will be so many. And by setting your organization as a default sharing link is a tidy way to make sure that we don't accidentally overshare. You could change that link as well, or that option, of course. And just running through this very quickly, confidential, we set it to private. This is how it looks. We got the default. We did the same thing, only allowing site owners to share the site. But here we set it to web only. And quickly around that, it's really about reducing the attack surface to have unmanaged devices going to the web only. And if we got the licenses, we could use Defender for Cloud Apps to control that entire browser session as well. So we could limit what they could do. They can't download stuff, they can't, whatever. But that's a part of another session, I would say. And the default sharing link, we set that to specific people here. The same thing here, private for the highly confidential. We set only people in our organization because we're not going to allow any guests inside of this one. Only site owners could share anything. We block unmanaged devices entirely, and we set the same thing here to specific people. And this is just examples because I wanted to show the differences. I mean, for a department team, maybe, not only the owners should be able to share stuff, but, it's about showing this. So we're blocking guests, we're controlling site sharing, we're blocking unmanaged device access. And we could also use the highly confidential label to encrypt the files. So we need to apply them separately to the files to do that. And when it comes to the product teams, we're using the confidential label. So we're controlling guests and site sharing. We limit device access to the web. And for the projects, we're using the general label where we only care about, only letting site owners share the site. Hope this makes sense. When it comes to expiration, this is really about finding these inactive teams. So here in Azure AD under groups and expiration, we could set this up, and we got the option of 180 days, 365 days, and also a custom value that needs to be at least 30 days. And we need to enter a fallback email if the group doesn't have any users. No, if the group doesn't have an owner. Groups that are actively in use are renewed automatically. So if we say 180 days, that means 180 days inactive. And if we're working with files in SharePoint, if we're joining a group or editing a group or liking a message in Outlook for the web, if we visit a channel, if we view a post in a Yammer community or an interactive email, if we do something with a form, view, creating it or edit it or respond to it, all of this will auto-renew the group each time we do anything of this. And, if we created the group via Teams, then the owner will be notified via Teams, so you could renew from the activity feed. But if you create from somewhere else, you're going to be notified via an email. And it works like this, that let's say, for the example, we have 180 days. We have been inactive for 150 days. So 30 days prior, we will get an email or notification. If we don't do anything, it will be 15 days, and then 1 day before expiration. And the team gets deleted. It's a soft deletion at first. You get 30 days to restore it. Otherwise, everything and all the associated workloads are deleted as well. So I would say Microsoft default backup and restore here is it's if you don't have any other backup and restore. So when it's gone after those 30 days, it's gone. You can't restore it. And once again, it's my favorite thing to see: increased responsibility for team owners. They must know why is this email, this notification coming. They need to know what that is. They also need to be able to decide if we're going to keep this group or this team as well. And it also deletes archive teams. So just a heads up, because some people think that when you archive a team, it's safe, but it's read only from Teams. But all of the content, you could still delete all the files in there. So you need retention for SharePoint and for Exchange as well. I would say make use of this to reduce manual labor. And 180 days is a good start. You could decide to go lower afterwards if you want to. And you really need retention policies, because we don't want to end up in a situation where we deleted things by mistake that we need to be compliant. Yeah. Making this easy, we set 180 days and using this policy, but they would really want to have different expiration reflecting the life cycle of the team. So, you know, a department should be indefinitely, maybe a product team should be, you know, less indefinitely, and a product team should be used for a shorter amount of time. Okay, so how will you create teams? It really comes down to two options here. We could use self-service via Microsoft Teams, or we could use a provisioning solution. And I think that our requirements really decide on what we can use here. If we only want collaboration templates and some simple settings, we could go with the self-service portal and using Teams templates to do this. And when I say self-service, I mean from Teams, you know, creating it from Teams normally. But if you want naming based on collaboration templates, or if you want sensitivity labels or retention labels connected to this specific collaboration templates, or a subset of these being able to select, or if you need expiration based on collaboration templates, you need to go with some sort of provisioning solution, something that you build on your own, a third-party tool, or something from the community. Okay, so if you go with the self-service scenario, you know it's common to limit who can create. You need Azure ADP 1 to do that as well. Let's say you create a security group and you say only these 20 people could create teams. It might help you controlling the sprawl and not get enormous amount of teams, but it might increase friction at the same time and add some additional work for IT if they need to do this. So if we limit, there must be a very smooth process. It cannot take a day. It cannot take, you know, maybe an hour or so, but we can't wait many days to do that, or otherwise people are just going to go to Dropbox or whatever. And if we lock the UI entirely, we must have a provisioning solution, of course. And really think about approvals, because I see a lot of people defaulting to approvals. We need approvals. We need approvals. Why do you need approvals? This adds friction. So if you have proper governance around your teams, and you might not need it at all, or you might need it for 2 of your templates, but not for 2 of the other ones. So think about that. And if you have enabled self-service, I mean, everyone could create, they're going to enter the names manually and all of those things. Make sure to have some post-provisioning governance in place, sending that email, giving them the checkbox to take everything off. It doesn't work practically, but yeah, it's good in theory at least. Okay, so you know, we decided all the departments should be created by IT, and the products, I don't know here. The project manager, it could be anyone as well, but and we decide that the project templates is the only one that could be created for everyone right now. It might mean that we add some templates, you know, further along as we go, but you need to start small to begin with. And they disabled the Teams creation via the UI, and we intend to use a provisioning tool instead. And they think that, you know, the project teams, they have such good governance around them, so they don't need any approvals as well. Hope this makes sense. Do we have time? I could just run this quickly.
Absolutely.
In Teams Admin Center, we got these settings and we got these policies. So you need to decide on if you're going to allow all Microsoft apps or if you want to allow only a subset, and which third-party apps you want to allow from the App Store. If you don't have Defender for Cloud Apps where you can monitor all the apps, you know, and see as you go the severity of them, you really need to instead limit this a little bit and think about what do you need and what is safe to use. And if you're using custom apps, you should, you know, everyone shouldn't be able to upload them, and you really need to think how you're going to present them as well. And you could also decide on which app you want to pin and make available to end users in the left field there. And, you know, since we're using policies here as well, does any users or group need some more apps or something different? If, let's say that HR needs 2 more apps, then you could just, you know, give them to HR, and you could pin them for them as well to have different policies for them. So Royals, they allow third-party apps and interaction with custom apps here, and they decide to allow all Microsoft apps. Maybe they shouldn't, but they also allow some third-party apps. They decide, okay, Jira Cloud and Adobe Creative Cloud, that is something that everyone is using. And they have also added a third-party solution for provisioning and adoption. They have also decided to add Viva Connections for the intranet. You should brand that and name it something different, but pulling in the intranet there as well. And they have decided to pin both Viva Connections and the provisioning tool, so to have it available for the users in Teams. And, you know, meetings is large, but quickly around that, you know, one thing is, are you going to decide to allow entire screen sharing, or are you only going to allow to use apps? Sometimes organizations think that there is a risk of oversharing if you share your entire screen. So that is somewhat common to do. And you need to think about how external users and guests are going to be, what they're going to be able to do in the Teams as well. And just know that even if you have a certain set of policies assigned to you, it's the organizers meeting that takes precedence. So if they have a different policy and some different rules around that is what you're gonna adhere to. So just for the sake of it, Royals, they don't allow sharing of the entire screen, only single applications. Only participants can give or request controls. Externals cannot give or request controls. And then they allow, you know, PowerPoint Live, Whiteboard, share notes. And we let guests join the meeting. We let people call in, but they can't override the lobby. It's only people in my organization that automatically is admitted. And guests cannot start meetings as well. They need to wait for the people coming in here. Okay, you've held out this long, so let's just summarize a little bit. You know, governance should be used to strengthen and protect the organization. We shouldn't suffocate the end users, we should empower them. It's really important. And really make sure to consider the user experience when you're doing this. Make sure that it's practically applicable. Don't just do decisions in isolation. Now it's secure, we don't care about the rest. That I see a lot in organizations. You know, security department, they're like, yo, my job is done here. And you should probably not roll out Teams with just default values, because it might not fit your organization's requirements and needs, because it's the Wild West if you do it like that. And finally, I would say that Teams, they provide a lot of governance options, and some of them are very easy to configure and update. So start somewhere, really get going, and then refine as you go. You don't have to do everything at once. And it's never too late for governance, even if it means that you need to apply it afterwards you started. And here you got a lot of resources. I could also send you the slides if you want to. That's no problem for me. I got a lot of notes in there. So, and
if we could share these slides as well, please, Simon. We'll be sharing the recording. Yeah. And I was busily trying to grab information out of these and wasn't always quick enough. So yeah, that'd be very useful.
Okay, so yeah, open for questions. It was as I told you, it was a lot of content, but hopefully you got something from it.
Well, I mean, I've been battling both with Teams governance in particular and with the big questions around organizational governance for much of this year, actually. So I found this really useful, not least of which, instead of just telling us what the governance features were, you made specific recommendations about how certain types of team might be configured. I found that very useful, and I have taken notes.
Yeah, and there's also, I would say it's a bit complex, but I don't know if you know, to make it a bit more complex here, but you know, Zero Trust, the whole idea with Zero Trust and Microsoft Zero Trust, they have this identity and device management recommendations, and they got a 3-tier model. And they have done the same really for security when it comes to Teams as well. So the whole idea here of having classifications and, you know, really thinking about how to use sensitivity labels and how to classify them and what type of settings, it's really based on that, because you might need this for an entire organization, but you could take that as a what do you say, something to start with and then just adapt it to your own requirements. But I think it's a good way to think about it, that, you know, it doesn't have to be that all of these teams are with this label. Of course not. It could be that we're going to have a project now and this is going to be very secure, so we need to have the highly confidential label on this. So you could also do like that. But I think it's the thing I really like about sensitivity labels and the whole automation around this is, as I told you, if Microsoft recommends, okay, you should only have the owners of a team being able to share the site. If that is the recommendation and you need to create the site and then you need to go in there manually and change that each and every time, it's not going to be done and it's not convenient. So being able to automate those type of things is super convenient from my perspective, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, the guaranteed way to break your governance is to make it onerous.
Yeah. But also, I think, you know, there's so many other things. As I told you, there's a policy that you could have for the people. You used to only do the dev preview that you decide on yourself, but you could also have the, what is it called? It's not update settings. It's update settings, I think, or upgrade settings. Not sure, but you can decide that 5 people should have the public preview in Teams, for instance. Someone needs to have those responsibilities. You might add automation. I don't know if you've seen Nikki Chappell's when she talks about automation around the evergreen stuff. But I think that's also convenient to help you keep track of things. But someone needs to own that. Someone needs to try that. Someone needs to understand that and bring that up later into the governance forum, where you can make these decisions then. Okay, how is this impacting us? Are we going to use that? Are we going to hold on with this? Are we not going to use it? You know. So when you come to this governance board, you should really be able to decide on these things. Maybe if it's okay, we need to acquire E5s, maybe you need to escalate that, but to some extent you need to be able to do these decisions inside of this steering committee or this group. So you might have some sub forums to handle this, a product owner, a architect, or whatever, discussing these things in advance. So a new feature comes to Teams and they discuss it, and then they present it in the governance format where you make the decisions, where everything is laid out. From my perspective, at least.
So one of the things that I'm trying to do is, first of all, I'm trying to build a list where all of these governance decisions can be captured. Because otherwise the organisation will have the governance board make the decision, but then later on they won't know what they did or why they did it, one of those two. But also to try and pre-populate such a list with a sensible set of default settings. And I think, again, you know, your talk has been very useful for me in particular, because it's given sort of handle on, so if it's this kind of a thing, here's a set of settings.
Yeah. And I think that what I've seen, if we think about some other, you know, person that is talks a lot about governance, Jasper Oosterveld, I think that what they do is that they have this huge Excel file with all the suggested settings, everything, you know, and an appendix with everything, and all the, so they go out, they have it as Teams governance, but they also have some of the additional workloads from the perspective of Teams, at least. And then they have some other things, you know, the templates, who should be in the steering committee, and then they workshop that and fill out these things. Yeah. And it might be that when you workshop this, you might as well change some of the settings because of requirements, but you do have everything there that you need in order to do this. You know, it's some sort of IP at least, you know, so you could do it a bit more quickly, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel each and every time, at least.
So I had another question, Simon. I hadn't appreciated that the ability to do Teams templates had moved on as far as it has. Does that still only template the Teams part, and you still get a vanilla SharePoint site when you use that approach? So I know you can build the SharePoint side using scripts, but okay.
Yeah, I think it maybe it depends on how you think of it as well, because I think that from my perspective, I think that it has pivoted, if that's the best word here, a little bit. And just hold on here, because I think that Teams now is really the collaboration part of things. You work with the stuff, you work with the content, right? So I think it's more about customizing and having everything you need in the team and using SharePoint as the backend. And it's less about customizing where you collaborate on the things, and maybe putting some more work around where you should consume things, because you shouldn't consume things in the teams. So when you have done collaborating, and some other people should be able to consume this, because it's, you know, you just want to read something here, then you should maybe have a communication site or something else over there where you consume it. And maybe that is more bound to the whole customization and making sure that the navigation is good and everything. So I don't mind leaving it very default in the backend SharePoint site for the team, because I think that the whole collaboration part here is the important thing, and you really need to have a next step when it comes to the consumption of things. I don't know if it got too philosophical, but it's how I think.
Only partly agree. I totally agree about the consumption side.
Yeah.
However, I think that if you were to take a product site, a product area, or in Teams, or a project or a department, I think that there potentially are additional features that could be deployed by default into SharePoint to support that. So it's quite common that I would want multiple libraries in a department site.
Yeah, I think you're right. I kind of feel like even if we get all the channels and everything there, just having all the correct content types and the metadata there and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You
I
just
mean,
can't do those
I
things in a
might have
single library.
spoken too soon.
Yeah. So it's a good
You have a
debate.
good point there. Yeah.
And so do you. I think the thing about but other things where it's just about consumption, living in a communication site, that being exposed some other way, and
Yeah.
sometimes I do expose it in Teams, but through a completely different type of a Teams area. I think that's an interesting thing to take on board.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you as well. And I think that is why I do love my custom provisioning tools or third-party tools, because you know, if you get a good one, you get so much help, you get so much, you know, value and governance around it. I've seen a couple of ones out there that where you just, you know this Stack Overflow thing where you want to ask a question. Not only I mean, it's a good user experience if you know that this one already exists, you know, that we got this in SharePoint at least. But also this whole, we have 5 different teams that's almost the same here. Did you mean any of these?
Yeah.
That is a very neat feature.
How sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
How scriptable is all of this? Because we were talking about how obviously what you'd like to do is to have production environments, test environments, and if it's scriptable, then you can plug it into DevOps. And potentially if Simon H was talking about how he desired to have the SharePoint site set up in a particular way. Obviously, if you can start scripting this, then you can make all those things so, because effectively somewhere in the background, you will pump all this stuff out and you can build a bit of automation in there.
Yeah, I think that if you wanna take it further than the default experience and configuring via PowerShell to do some of the stuff here, I think you should go with Microsoft Graph. Either, you know, Graph fully, where you could just create teams and by using JSON, but you could also do stuff like PMP provisioning, the XML things there as well. So I think if you're gonna go custom, go all the way. Don't go halfway, and definitely build in everything you need. And I would say that the most important thing, at least from my perspective, sorry if I'm stepping on someone's toes here, but what I hate is seeing when people create a form, for just a normal form, you know, for ordering sites, because it gives you no idea what's happening in the back end. It gives you no response. If it's a collision because the alias already exists or something, it gives, as an end user, you know nothing here. So at least I would say create a Power App and just do it like a Power App form or something very simple tied to a SharePoint list, where you at least could add some logic to see when you write in the name if it already exists or something. I think that's the only key thing that I think you always need. But other than that, it's up to your imagination. We could build stuff in .NET. You could build stuff with PowerShell automation. We got Azure Functions. We got durable functions. We got the Power Platform here as well. So
yeah, you could put the SPFX front end and call all the back end stuff, and then you could have a very interactive experience.
Yeah, I did like a blog post for a couple of years ago where I reverse engineered how they do, when you order it in SharePoint, when you start writing the name and you get the suggestions, and then you get the whole. So I used their internal APIs to do that. So I did a SharePoint framework web part, just showing how that works really, and also learned that. But it was also because from the UI you could decide I'm gonna use this site script. It's called something else nowadays, site templates. And also decided to incorporate that as well. So you could just, I want to use this site template, because it was only like a GUID where you sent into some JSON over there. So yeah. But I mean, decide your own front end. I would say have some logic to really help the end user a little bit at least, and help them know what's happening behind the scenes. so they don't have to contact IT and, you know, what happened with my site that I ordered. I think that's the essentials, at least.
But the only thing is, when you sort of talk about provisioning, everyone thinks about the creation, and then there's that overall life cycle, and that's where I think a lot of the provisioning platforms, you know, these third-party solutions, they give you that life cycle, you know, the expiration policies, renewal policies, and that's quite often forgotten about. And when you start really building a solution, it becomes very expensive. You're doing this, you know, customizing and building these custom solutions. So it's definitely something to really think about. Especially when some of them provide, like, you can say, well, this is my template and this is a site and anybody can configure that, just replicate that when I create a new site. I mean, there's a lot of value. You know, if you start having developers having to make tweaks to templates and things, that can get quite expensive. But if you can put that in the power of, you know, a business user, and they can make tweaks to the project template, you know, that's really powerful, I think. So,
some provisioning tools / governance tools have this middle ground as well, where you could be very granular. Of course, you could have these custom expirations and, you know, life cycle management around that. What will happen then? Will we contact, or should it be archived right away, etc., etc.? So it's awesome, but at the same time as well, the whole when you create, you could also, when you set up this template, sometimes you could say that, okay, this is fixed, but this is, you know, the end user could decide on this as well. As they create the team, they could add, you know, these snippets, or if they want a project library or whatever. So I think that's also very good. And as you say, you can't compete with the ones that has done this really, really, really good, but it might be a bit expensive when you look at it. I know a company that does the best solution. It's $2 a user, at least up till 1,000. I mean, it's not that much, but if you compare to the normal licenses, and you get a lot of the E2 that you get in E5 as well, guest management and things like that, being able to pull out reports on, you know, how messy your environment is, options for remediation, you name it, you got it. Yeah, I think I need to partner with them.
I think you do.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say, I think the next step for me, other than, you know, having it written down what we want to do and suggestions and keeping tabs on that, I think that I would like to have a lot of, let's say, PowerShell scripts or something like that to create you know, the sensitivity labels, at least the base configuration around that, maybe some you know, conditional access policies, and a lot of these governance options, just, you know, just run the scripts and get it there. That would be super awesome. But who has the time?
Needs to be a community effort, doesn't it? To do that.
Yeah.
To kind of this toolkit. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. Was it something particular that was, you know, very unclear or something?
No,
something that you want to know more.
I thought it was very clear.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so hard to know because I'm not used to doing this over the, you know, over Teams, and it's all silent and everything, and I'm trying to make my dad jokes and no one is laughing, and you know, it's so hard.
It's a really weird experience when everybody turns off camera, turns off audio, and you have no idea if anybody's there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In your presentation, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. I would love to see you some more IRL as well. Maybe I'm coming to UK and we're doing a Simon trio or something.
Oh yeah, that would be a band, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Maybe I need to go and visit the Content and Cloud in London or something, and taking a trip. Yeah.
Go to Manchester. And we'll come over and we'll hang out.
Absolutely.
Mr. Doy. Okay, so football. What's your team?
I don't really follow. So Ipswich, but
Okay.
yeah,
Then that's fine.
fine.
I'm not having a good couple of years. Let's put it like that. Yeah.
No, I thought it was very good. Do you practice presentation Zen in your presentations? Because there's
What's that?
So the idea that you're not putting all your messages on the slides, but you're just putting prompts, and because the slides were very not too text heavy, which I think is great. I really like it. So
Because I was thinking that they might be too text heavy, but at the same time I have this internal conflict that I want to have the points I'm making, for people to read as well.
yeah.
Maybe I would do it a bit differently if I was on stage. But I haven't really thought about it. I'm just doing things. That's my way. I don't think too much about it. So yeah.
In a recording, of course, you've got the transcript, so you don't necessarily need to replace all of the text. So there's a slightly different approach between the two mediums, whereas in the room, you might want to put it out in longhand, or you might just want to have a thought-provoking screen, thought-provoking center point to what you're talking about.
And I think as well that what I will try is in some other session, I will think to, have less text and maybe have hidden, or hidden, what's the word here, but hidden slides as well that are more text heavy, so people could read it as well. So I'm just sending it out. I think
could make
that's
notes
an option
available, of course, and the notes could include the more long-winded stuff and links.
Yeah.
This slide, the one I just shared in chat, Simon, was very good because he kept coming back to it. So it acted as a really good anchor slide. It sort of dictated the path of the story as we went through this and built and built and built. It was a great slide. So good, I stole it.
Yeah, I think that was I mean the idea. Now I'm going over a lot of things here, but I kind of wanted to, even if it's just examples, I kind of wanted to show how to think about it as a whole cake, not only the candles and all the. I don't know why I went to cake for the example, but it is what it is. It is what it is. But thanks, I really appreciate it, and I'm always open to if you think something wasn't good, that's fine by me as well. So yeah.
No, I thought that was a great session, very clear, nice pace as well. It didn't rush ahead, so we had time to think about what you were saying and absorb it. So great job. Really appreciate you coming and doing it, Simon.
Yes,
and we'll quite possibly look to get you back again next time, probably next year if we've got our schedule right.
Yeah.
But
you
next time
could order something, because I wouldn't say I know everything, but I'm getting a bit wide, so you could order from a variety of things, and I could just try to pull something together. So
also we're a great user group to try out new talks on, so if you practice something out, we're friendly.
Definitely love the vibe, or from what I've seen, it's very, you have been very friendly, and it's good conversation, and I like it. Maybe the next time I'm not gonna have some water in here. Maybe I should have a
gin,
big pint, or some gin or something.
Yeah.
Some Hendrix. Love me some Hendrix.
We started doing these online sessions at, a couple of months into lockdown, when we realized we were going to be in that for a long time, and we went from doing a session every other month to doing one every 2 weeks. So we've practiced this quite a bit now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, seems like forever now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, if you do come over to Manchester, Simon, Simon Hudson will introduce you to some good stouts.
Yes, I will. Amongst many things, there are fine beers and other delights to be had.
Other delights. I have to run now, so thanks very much for your talk.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Simon.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
you.
Cheers all. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, definitely sometime. I don't know in the nearest future, but maybe there's. I mean, you're quite good in the UK of having these events that I always miss out on, or I never I never remember the call for speakers or something like that. So I'm like, why didn't I send in something?
Well, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks trying to get my head around the purview, and it's big and it's really hard to get all of it into your head. So if you fancy looking at doing that as a double header sometime, that's a good way of doing it.
I think that I kind of want to do something deeper around that. I'm not sure. I like the sensitivity labels, the information protection, and maybe some DLP, but I think retention is too large for me right now because I only know the technical side of things and haven't really, worked in a project for real. So I would just pretend.
See, I come at it a bit from the other side because I have been responsible for governance, risk and compliance in a number of organizations without being the technical person. So I'm the guy that gets to go to jail. So I really think about these things a lot from the business point of view, but then when I get down into the tech, it's a bit overwhelming sometimes. So I think, bringing those two sides together is an interesting challenge and much needed at the moment, because Microsoft, and I've said this in my recent blog, Microsoft tend to go governance. It's all about governing the platform. And as you said, it's not. It's actually about governing the business. And one element of that is making the platforms work for you.
Yeah. And by the way, some other things. I know you come from a lot of business side of things as well. I'm considering, it might be too soon for me, but I'm considering maybe doing like this MBA in what is it called? Edinburgh, I think. Edinburgh, right?
Okay.
Edinburgh,
yeah.
Let's see if my company is if they're gonna allow me. I think I need to do a lot on my free time, but would love to learn some more around that. I'd love to go more in that path at least.
Yeah, I think that intersection between business and the technology is really important and not well pursued at the moment. Certainly not well enough.
Yeah, I think if I'm gonna pat myself on the shoulder a little bit, I think that as I start to learn and get better at listening at the organizations and their problems, I still think it's very valuable that I remember almost everything when it comes to the whole development thing as well, knowing what we're able to extend, what we're not, what we shouldn't do, the bigger picture around Power Platforms and things like that as well. So remembering all those technical things as well, I think it's very helpful for me at least to understand what we should do and shouldn't do. It also helps when new things come as well, because it gets a bit faster to understand why they're doing it like that or why they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always about being able to put the technology in context of the business and vice versa. Yeah.
But
anyway,
as you said, I think as well, like if I think there's a lot of stuff out there, this is how it works, this is how you set up retention, this is how you do. But I think there's a lot of things lacking is we talk about discovering the data, then we go there and then we go there, but not really on how to do it for real. Okay, you should sit down and first looking at the Content Explorer or whatever, and then you decide on the sensitive information types that you should use, and then you monitor this, and the entire process of doing that.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not an expert at all at that, but I think that it would be really good for people out there to understand how you could do and how you could help organizations get going with it, even if it's a bit technical, but the whole process of discovering the data for real and what you should do with it then.
Yeah, absolutely. More like a walkthrough guide than a set of documentation.
Something like that, do this 10-step approach. I don't know, this patented 10-step approach. Do this and do this and do this. And then, talking about what that process is, maybe. I don't know. Just thinking out loud.
Right. I think I hear my wife is home, and that means it's beer o'clock. And it's even more beer o'clock for you, Simon. I look forward to speaking again soon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers all. See you all next month.
Bye.
Hopefully.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye.